Hey, how you doing? Justin here. Today we're going to be exploring what's probably the most common guitar effect you're likely to encounter. It's the one called reverb. We're going to talk a bit about what reverb is, the different types of reverb, how to get reverb onto your sound, what all of the different settings do. There'll be some additional information over on the website, so do check that link in the description if you happen to be over on YouTube. This is going to be part of an effects series as well, so go and check that out and we'll be discussing all of the different types of effects and how to use them. So what is reverb? Well, reverb is actually a naturally occurring effect that you would hear commonly in your everyday life. An obvious example would be if you go into a hall or a church, you notice your voice sounds a little different, kind of echoey. You hear a footstep or a clap last way longer than the original sound. Well, it's actually sound waves that are bouncing off reflective surfaces and you're hearing them back. It's the sound of reverberating sound waves. Reverb effects can add the illusion of space to an instrument's sound, giving you a much bigger ambient and atmospheric soundscape. Now, it's one of the reasons why in recording studios you see so much soundproofing. You're trying to remove as much of the natural reverb, and then you add the reverb on later on. Now, historically, you might have gone to a room that had naturally great reverb, like Abbey Road or Ocean Way. So bands would seek a room with a beautiful reverb in it to record in. Now, things have got a little bit more creative since then, and we use reverb not just to make all of the instruments sound like they're in the same room or in a particular environment, but you might have different reverbs on different instruments to create these kind of clashes and interesting mixes of atmospheric conditions, which may or may not be natural, but they're at least super interesting. So how do you go about getting reverb onto your sound? Well, there are quite a few different ways. Many amplifiers will have it built in. Funnily enough, most of mine don't. I've got one which is just here, the Tone King Imperial, which has an incredible spring reverb. If you've got something like a Boss Katana, that will have reverb built in. Most of those kind of amps with multi-effects will have a reverb as well, so you've got something to explore there. They may have different types of reverb, or you might just have one, like this Tone King Imperial just has a spring reverb, not other sorts, which is one of the advantages of using a pedal. You can use also plugins, which, to be honest, most of the time, if you're listening to reverb on my voice, if I'm singing or on acoustic guitar, I'll be using a plugin. I really love this UAD EMT 250 is the plugin I use most of the time. You will have heard that if you've listened to any of my videos in the last few years. So yeah, using a plugin for acoustic guitar or voice, you're going to use, it's just you plug it into your audio recording software. It's not normally a pedal. You could also record in a place with a great natural reverb. Well, that's a little more complicated to do that, and you've got to set up your mics properly and record the reverb space separately. Perhaps it's a much more complicated affair, but you can get some super stellar results if you chose to go down that path. So now it's time to talk about different reverb types. I promise you I'm going to do some playing and you can do some listening in just a second. We'll talk about the sounds of the different effects, but I want to do this a little bit historically. So the very first type of reverb was the type of reverb that you got in the room. A real famous example that you might want to go and listen to is Columbia Records' 30th Street Studio, which was where Miles Davis recorded his legendary album A Kind of Blue. Super reverb. That's a great example of naturally occurring reverb in the room, so you might want to go check that out. Record producer Bill Putnam is credited with the first artistic use of reverb, where he used an echo chamber on the track Peg of My Heart by the Harmonic Cats. There'll be a link to that in the text of the lesson over on the website. You might want to go and have a listen to that. That's the use of an echo chamber. But the first kind of real artificial reverb machine was the EMT plate, which was basically a giant metal plate suspended in a box. We actually had one in my old recording studio. If you look back to any of my really early videos where I'm on that big old grey couch, on the roof of that recording studio complex, there was an EMT plate. They weigh 200 kilograms, so they're not the kind of thing that you're going to be lugging around on your pedal board, but they sound incredible. So I'm having to record this video in a few different batches in case you're wondering why I'm suddenly wearing a different t-shirt. What I'd like to take you through now is a look at the different settings that you're going to encounter on different reverb pedals, and then we'll go through and talk about the sounds of the different ones, the plate and the spring and a hall and a room, what the differences are, why you might choose one over the other, that kind of thing. So For this, I'm using the Boss Reverb RV6 pedal. Really, really good one for demonstrating the different types of reverb, and the controls are pretty simple. When you're starting out with effects, you probably want something without too many parameters. The pedals I like are the ones with infinite number of different parameters and variables to play around with. When you're starting out, that can just be a little bit overwhelming. So something like this Boss pedal with just a few settings is probably where you want to start. So what I've done to begin with, I've set all of the settings to roughly 12 o'clock. It's a really good trick that Boss do, is often it gives you a really good starting point of a usable sound if you set everything at 12 o'clock. So you can hear straight away that fizziness there. If I turn that off, suddenly the sounds all kind of disappear. Back on again. There you can clearly hear like what reverb is. Let's talk about these different settings now. So the first one, E level or effect level. It's also called blend. It's a real common one, also called mix. So what this is talking about is how much reverb versus the primary sound, the core sound, your original dry guitar sound, dry meaning no effect. So how much of the dry signal is going through and how wet are we making it? How much reverb are we adding? So here, this was the middle ground. Probably a bit much to me. It still sounds a little bit zingy, but if we turn that right up, doesn't sound very good really. If we put it right down, so just a little, it's actually pretty nice like that. It's very subtle. Again, if we just turn it off for a sec, back on with just a little bit, you can hear it really, it does add something even though it's quite subtle. Okay, so it's not a big obvious thing where you just fell down the well, but this versus, do you see it gives it a space when you've got just that little bit of reverb on there. So effect level is pretty important. I'm going to turn the effect level back up to 12 o'clock, which I think is a bit too much, but I want you to hear clearly the reverb as we describe these other controls and what they do. So the tone control, again, there's lots of different variables here. Lots of different pedals call it a different thing. A tone control, generally when I turn it in a clockwise direction, will make the sound brighter. If I turn it back the other way, it's kind of like, that's a little bit more like it's going into a cave. You're getting a lot of low frequency reflections. At the top here, it's high. Often on budget pedals, I find when the tone gets too sharp, it gets a little bit, I think they're called artifacts. It starts to sound a little bit too digital when you get too much of that. But I generally prefer a brighter reverb sound than a low one. I find particularly with electric guitar, if you're in a band setting, you don't want too much bass sounds on the guitar because it gets in the way with the bass sound or the bass drum. So generally you don't want too much low sound. If you're playing on your own, it doesn't really matter. Generally, I tend to err on the side of having a little bit brighter than not. That's tone, and so you'll often hear that as being high frequency damp or low frequency damp is the other thing that you get. So a low frequency damp is going to push down those low sounds and let more of the high ones through. High pass filter, it could be called as well. And the other one, a high frequency damp, would be dampening or lessening the high sounds. Tone is a really great way of describing it, though. Again, if you're new to effects, it's just obvious. I want it brighter clockwise. If I want it darker, anti-clockwise. The third control on this one is time. So this is how long the delay lasts for. So remember, the effect level is how much level you get versus the original sound, and then the time is how long it lasts for. So I'm going to crank it right up. It should last for quite a while. Still going. Now when it's really long like that, if you're playing a few notes, it can all kind of get mixes together a little bit. So generally, if you're going for really long reverb sounds, you probably don't want to be playing lots of notes unless you're going for a very specific effect. Generally speaking, the very long reverbs will be for things like atmospheric stuff where you're just going to play a few notes. If you want a sound to last a long time, you're probably better off going for digital delay anyway, realistically. But you know, having a long reverb time and kind of a lot of it, you know, something like that might be useful. So you're kind of creating trying to create this atmosphere again. This is the same thing without any reverb. It's just got nothing. There's no, it's not doing anything. Put it back on. Put it in a place. This is why reverb's really important. Okay, it's a big deal getting the not necessarily the right thing, because it can be a creative tool as well. You don't feel like that there's some thing that it has to be, that you have to use this particular reverb here. There are things where one sound might be more traditionally useful than other ones. For example, this spring reverb, which we'll go into in a sec, is very much akin to the kind of the surf sound. So yeah, let's start the next control on this pedal anyway is the different types of reverb. So at the moment, all of those sounds we listen to are a plate reverb. So based on this EMT plate, which was basically a big metal plate with transducers on it, the sound, the guitar sound, or whatever sound voice would shake the plate around, make a sound, and then you'd have these little, I'm not sure if it's actually microphones or something else that picks up the sound, but something else picks up the sound and feeds it back into the original one. That's where you get that sound from. I really like plate reverbs on voices and acoustic guitar. If you've heard my acoustic guitar in any videos, it had a plate reverb on it because I had it all the time in kind of the recording process, not through the Kemper or through the amp, but just an effect plug-in. So that's the plate. Now, if I'm going to switch it around here now to spring, I'm just going to turn the effect level and the time up a bit so you can really clearly hear the difference here. Yeah, listen to the difference now between the plate. There we go. That one's quite bright and zingy, but it's got a difference. To me, it sounds like a spring. It really. I've got. Okay. That's the sound that was built into a lot of those early amps, like the Fender Deluxe Reverb, those kind of amps. Was really, really common early days with reverb to use this effect. You know, especially cranking up quite a lot of it and having, you know. Don't want to play the song because then I run into copyright things, but you get the idea. That particular song with the you can hear it as soon as you're playing that fast thing with the spring reverb. It adds the sound to it. There's something about it. Lots of times you will, when you start to listen to the different sounds, especially I would encourage you to explore the effects on your own. The more you do that, the more you'll start to recognize them in real life. So when you listen to a record and you're trying to copy the sound of a particular track, you'll go, oh, that sounds like this type of reverb or that type of reverb. So it's a really good idea just to explore them on your own and see what you can come up with. But sound of the spring reverb, very distinctive. Versus the plate. I'm going to turn the settings down a bit because it didn't sound good on the plate up there. See, it's a really, really different sound. Hey, so plate and spring are probably the most common ones that I use regularly. I'm just going to keep going around just because it's the next one on this particular setting. It's called modulate. Now, modulate is a little bit like adding a chorus pedal to the delayed, to the reverb sound. So you get a... Yeah, there's the plate, regular, just to... Here's the modulate. It's like it's adding a little bit more, you know, unicorn magic fairy dust stuff into the sound. It will be like an effect that we're going to talk about a little later called chorus. It's adding in a kind of slightly detuned effect to the chorus, to the reverb. So that's a modulate. There's loads of different reverb pedals will have a different kind of effect when we start talking about modulation. It's something I'll talk about a bit in a sec when we talk about different pedals. So yeah, we've got modulate, we've got spring, we've got plate. Now we've got the next two are hall and room. So what do you think a hall and a room is going to sound like? A hall and a room. Let's have a listen to one and the other. I'm going to turn the settings up again a little bit just so we can clearly hear the difference here. So if I play now, this will be the hall. And here's the room. Now, if any of you have done a gig in like a school hall or something like that at sound check and there's no one in there, that's what it sounds like. I'll drop my pick. This is exactly. That's it. That's why it's called a hall reverb, because it sounds like one of those wood panelled floors with loads of echo. Whereas if you were playing in a smaller room, you know, like in the back of a pub or whatever, and you play and there's no people in there, you'd hear a lot more of a sound like that. So these descriptive terms, when you hear them called a cathedral or a canyon or a cave or whatever, they're describing the sound of those reverbs. It's technology's got very clever now, and you can actually sample reverb in different spaces. So yeah, you can end up, especially in studio land and sound effects, you can get all sorts of kind of crazy reverbs that really, they change the character of what the sound is that you're playing, you know. It does also bring the question, if you were actually playing in a hall, would you need a hall reverb? And the answer is definitely no. If you stick on a big reverb in a very active room with lots of reverb in it, probably be a little bit overwhelming and not sound very good. But also, just as a little tip for any of you that are doing gigs, if you play in a room that's empty, the reverb is a lot. There's a lot of reverb around, it's bouncing off the walls. When you fill that same room up with lots of people, a lot of that reverb will be gone. So you do have to kind of be aware of that as well. Yeah, we'll get on to a little bit more about if there's too much reverb or not, if it's possible to do that. But let's finish talking about some of these different types, okay? So room and hall. Now, there's another couple of effects on here. There's one called dynamic. Now you can hear if I play, it's kind of swelling up afterwards. So this a dynamic reverb tends to dip down a little bit while you're still playing and then blossom when you finish. It's kind of useful if you're playing a lot of fast things, so it's not going to get in the way while you're playing. So, but then afterwards, it's got some sort of sound going on. It's not one that I use a whole lot, to be completely honest. Next one is called Shimmer. Now, Shimmer, for me, was made famous by this pedal, the Strymon blueSky. The shimmer in this is amazing. It's kind of like, it's the one thing I really love about that pedal is the shimmer effect. And if I want a shimmer sound, I would probably get that pedal out just for that particular sound. It's not my favorite pedal overall, and I kind of feel a bit funny about doing this, but I'm going to. But this pedal, this is the blueSky. This is the flagship Strymon pedal. Very, very expensive pedal. It broke one day after 1 year. And so it was therefore out of warranty, and the selector switch busted, and to get it repaired I was supposed to send it all the way back to America, pay for a repair and get it shipped back again. It was like, that really made me a bit grumpy at that company, so I don't tend to use their stuff much anymore. Anyway, so enough of my ranting, back to the shimmer effect. You're going to hear it, it's going to be pretty obvious. The Boss version is a little bit stronger than what I would normally use, but So it starts to sound a little bit more artificial. So, the Strymon one doesn't have that kind of artificial quality to it. We'll talk, like I said, we'll talk about different pedals again in a second. But the Shimmer adds this. Yeah, it's more fairy dust that gets added in there. Now, the last effect on this Boss one isn't really strictly a reverb. It's a delay plus reverb. So delay is like an echo. So dong, 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 dong. So if I play, okay, that's adding a digital delay. That is not a reverb. Okay, those pulses, that's digital delay. That's something we're going to talk about another time. There's reverb as well, and it is kind of handy to have a reverb and a delay together. If you only had one pedal, then that would be a cool thing to have, but I would tend to just use a reverb pedal for just reverb and then a delay pedal for delays. But that is, that's the other setting that we have on that. As I said, when you get kind of into bigger pedals, like more expensive pedals, you end up with more different things to play around with. So like, let's just have a look at a couple of other pedals as well while we're here. So this is the Neunaber Immerse pedal. You kind of get an idea. This is like double the price of the Boss one, I guess. And like I really like the plate on this, the sound of the plate. It's like really rich. To add something else to it. It's just a really, really lovely one. Even though it's really long, it doesn't seem to get in the way in a way that other ones do. Their spring reverb is pretty good as well. Okay, so it's got that sort of thing. We've also got a shimmer on this one. You can hear there is a lot of shimmer there, but it's not as drastic as the Boss thing. So that's a nice shimmer. They've also got their own kind of thing. There's it's too much. As soon as I start playing notes like that, sounds terrible, but for this strummy, lovely. We definitely want to bring the mix down. Even then, that's still probably a little bit too much. We've got a separate type. You see here it's got a tone control. It does control also the time, although that doesn't make a huge difference to me, but the tone effect, say for the spring reverb here, just turn all of these up a little bit again. We'd put it right down. It's a lot darker, and right up. It's a lot brighter. It's a little bit maybe more subtle than the Boss one. It's in some ways a little bit more usable. One thing here that we haven't got to yet, which is pre-delay. Now, pre-delay, also really, really important. So pre-delay is like a gap before the reverb starts. I don't tend to use it a whole lot, but it does have a place. So right now there's no pre-delay. Just turn it on. I don't want it too crazy here. So if I just play now, the reverb comes as soon as I play. If I turn the pre-delay up, I'm going to turn it right up to the max. You'll hear I play, and then there's a little gap, a pre-delay before the reverb, and then it starts. It's kind of like it blooms afterwards. Here. Turn it right back off. Immediately after I play, I'm not exactly sure what that's emulating. I find it weird looking at the camera with my glasses on. I don't know why. I need the glasses to be able to look at the pedal, but don't like talking to the camera with the glasses on. Weird. Anyway, guess I'll have to get used to it as I get older. But the pre-delay thing, I'm not exactly sure where it occurs in real life. I assume it's like a tunnel where the reverb occurs somewhere else. So it takes a little while before the reverb starts to come back to you. But pre-delay is quite a common thing. You get it on a lot of different pedals. yeah, it's not something I use a whole lot. Modulation and shimmer and things like that I do use, but I tend to use them in an after I've recorded it situation. So in post, we call it. So I would use that in a DAW, a digital audio workstation. I happen to use Logic, the Apple recording software. So I tend to use it as a plugin, and there are lots of different plugins. You get plugins like you get pedals. Each one has a particular thing that it does really well, so you end up with loads of different ones. I do tend to use this UAD, Universal Audio EMT250, which is a replica of the EMT250, which was a digital reverb, but there's just something about the sound of that particular reverb that really connects for me. But you'll probably find that different ones connect for you, and for sure different ones work in different situations. That's why you might end up with, you know, a bunch of different pedals. Some you'll like for some reasons and others you'll like for other reasons. That's just kind of how it goes, you know. Let's have a look at another one. So this is the blueSky, bit of a legendary pedal here. I've got it set on the shimmer, medium mix, medium decay, little bit of pre-delay, only a little bit of low damp, and then the high thing. So you can hear really this shimmer effect. It's a really great effect, shimmer. Okay, if we just put it back to normal for a second so you can hear again the difference between their plate and their spring, for example. I mean, that is just a lot nicer plate than the Boss one. I'm sorry, Boss, I love you. You know, I love Boss stuff, but and this is a different price point, at least twice as expensive as the Boss. Chuck it down onto the spring. They also have a room. We may as well have a quick look at the room, but here's a room. It's very, very good. And the spring. It sounds springy to me, the spring. I love the fact that it's called a spring and it sounds to me like a spring. So we got little toggle switches there for that. We've got normal mod for modulate, which is going to be like we had the modulation on the Boss thing. Like having this kind of chorus effect. It is a bit extreme. What I'm using here isn't kind of the way I tend to use those things, but yeah, it's a good example. It is like a classic reverb pedal, the blueSky, and it was the first reverb pedal that I had that I was like, oh man, I love this thing so bad, and it was, you know, I toured with it for a long time. So yeah, the blueSky is an amazing pedal. I won't go through any more of them, but things like this, the Specular Tempest. This is a reverb and delay machine. It's super creative, super deep, loads of different kind of parameters to play around with. So if I'm looking for getting really creative and trying to explore things, then I'm probably more likely to pop this on the board than the Strymon, which would be if I just wanted like a really great simple reverb. I'll probably pick that. The Neunaber, like I said, I like this is a bit more of a road friendly one. So I tend to put this when I'm doing on workshops or whatever. I might take this pedal along. I really love the sound of their own one, and the plate in this one's really good as well. So it does become this little bit of a game of finding particular sounds that you like, or sounds that you like for a particular situation. Again, exploring them just a little bit, you'll find that fairly quickly you'll hear the difference between a plate and a spring and a hall and a room. Often you can kind of get an idea just by listening and imagining, closing your eyes and imagining, well, where is this placed? Like, what of as the guitar player or the producer put on this to make, where is he trying to make it sound like? Is it in a hall? Is it in a room? Is it in a massive canyon? Is it in space? Where is it? You know, your imagination or your kind of perception of the sound is probably better than imagination. Your perception of the sound will probably give you those answers to those questions. So we did a little thing on Instagram as well with some questions about reverb. So the first one that came through was, is there such a thing as too much reverb? And the answer is definitely yes. It hurts me to say that because I love reverb, and I'm definitely one of the people who puts too much reverb on things, and you know, sometimes that's okay, sometimes it's not. But yeah, you have to use your taste and judgment there a little bit. I can't tell you how much is too much, but experiment and yeah, generally speaking, I go for the setting that I like, and then I turn it down a little bit because I know that I'm prone to putting on too much reverb. The best pedal for reverb, my favorite one, how to choose one pedal for reverb. It does come down a budget in the end. That was from Everdice, that question. Probably if I'm going to pick one right now, it would be the Specular Tempest, but it's an expensive pedal. If I was only going to pick one and it was a budget one, probably be the Boss. But there are cheaper ones. Still, the Boss, last time I checked, was like £150, I think, and you can get a reverb pedal as cheap as like £30 or £40. I haven't tried one of those yet. I'm going to, and I'm planning to do a little bit of a reverb pedal shootout at some point in the future. But yeah, this Immerse, the Neunaber, amazing pedal as well. Really like that. But again, I think that's like £300, so twice as much as the Boss. So yeah, it gets to be a difficult one. I would encourage you to go and try some out. If you're new to effects, getting a pedal that's like loads of pedals built into the same thing is a good idea. I've just noticed on the floor, I bought this, the Boss GT1000 here. I often take this on workshops and stuff because it's like all of the Boss pedals ever in one box. So if you're looking to find out, like, what does a chorus sound like? What does a flanger sound like? What are the different types of reverb sound like? You can get one pedal that's got all of that stuff built in. The Boss Katana amp's got incredible amount of effects built into it. So, for me, those things weren't around when I was growing up. We had to buy individual pedals. But now, if somebody was new to effects, getting one of those amps with all of the effects built in is a really good idea. And then once you know the effects that you really like and you've got used to them a bit, then you can go to a store and straight away, hey, I'm trying out this reverb. Oh, wow, this is so much better than the one I've got at home. Or and you can start to, develop your taste a little bit and start to get a bit more fussy with it. The difference between reverb and chorus is they're completely different. Reverb is this echoey effect, and chorus is a modulation effect. We're going to do a whole video just on chorus, so I won't go too much into that right now. How to choose between different types of reverb. Well, it becomes a taste thing, or either you like the sound of this or you like the sound of that in a particular situation, or it becomes something where you're trying to replicate the sound off a record, in which case you need to be familiar with what the different sounds are and go, oh, that sounds like a spring reverb. This is the effect that I'm going to put on here. I'm just looking at my question list here, and there's loads of them. Most of them I feel like I've covered already. One that we haven't is, do all vocals, guitar and drums get equal reverb? Well, they can do if you're trying to put all of the band in the same place. Like if you want them to sound like they're playing together, then yeah, you would use probably the same reverb. Sometimes you use a different reverb on the voice still, and it still somehow sounds cohesive. I'm not sure why that is. When I've been making records with my band We Came as Strangers, we use different reverbs on different things all the time because we're not trying to go for like a realistic, the band is playing in the one place thing. We're looking to try and get creative with the sound, so we'll find the most interesting or the coolest reverb sound for that particular guitar part, and the voice will be treated differently. So it's up to what kind of level of creativity you're going for, if you're after the band playing together sound or whether you're just going for like an interesting soundscape or an interesting texture. Okay, the last question I'm going for here was from Wide and Deeper, and it's, am I weird for playing completely dry? And definitely not. So a dry sound can be really, really cool. When I record, I mostly record dry and add the effects later, so I can take them off again. Because once reverb is on, it's really hard to take off. There are plugins that kind of do it, but they change the sound in a less than pleasing way most of the time. So recording dry is generally a really good idea, so you can add the reverb on later. And dry, particularly on voice, I like the sound of a dry voice because it sounds really close. It's like they're there with you. When you hear a lot of reverb on a voice, it feels further away. But when it's dry, it's like it's intimate, a bit more intimate. I tend to put reverb on my voice on the little demos when I'm doing demos at the beginnings of the song lessons. Kind of hides things a little bit. I feel like it enables me to hide in the reverb a little bit more. It makes it sound a little bit nicer. I'm still not super confident as a singer. I think I can sing okay sometimes, and other times it's still pretty dreadful. So yeah, a bit of reverb seems to help things along a little bit for me. But yeah, a dry sound, I think if you're a really confident singer, a dry sound can be pretty intimate and startling because we're used to hearing a voice with reverb on. So I think we've covered about everything that there I can think of right now about reverb. This has been a bit of a deeper lesson maybe than it could have been. It could have just been like, hey, here's reverb, this is what it sounds like, and off we go. But it's a really interesting thing. Do remember, over on the website I've got a little bit more stuff about the history and some specific settings that you might like to try out on different pedals, my preferences. And I think as well we've got some Katana presets still on the website. If you go to the Katana part of the website, there's some specific presets which involve the reverb, different reverb settings. So yeah, hope you enjoyed that. We're planning some more. I'm going to do digital delay, chorus, flanger, all of that sort of stuff as well. So do let me know in the comments if you like this really big, deep lesson, or if you prefer just a short, hey, this is what it does, and you know, can you cut out that other stuff, please, mate. Let me know in the comments, either on the YouTube video or over on the website. There'll be, as usual, loads more information for you on the website. I've already done a primer on the amp and on the guitar as well, so those things obviously have a massive impact on your sound, much more than the pedal will. So you might want to go and check those out if you're just starting your tone journey. Have yourselves a fantastic day. I'll see you plenty more very soon. You take care. Bye-bye.